Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for this organizing debrief on Cannabis Safety Month. Tonight, we're going to go over what is Cannabis Safety Month, why it's so important this year, and all the different ways that you can plug in. So that I'm just going to jump right in. So this is actually the second year that we have done Cannabis Safety Month. And last year we focused mostly on product safety. And for several reasons, which I'll go over in just a second, we've decided to broaden this month to cover all sorts of different aspects of safety. So Cannabis Safety Month is a national public education campaign that addresses public concerns about cannabis safety through education, inclusion, and community building. And so this is our opportunity to listen to concerns in our communities, whether that's neighbors, parents, uh, school boards, or hospitals and your medical professionals. So right now we're in sort of a precarious time in medical cannabis history. A lot of people think that President Trump is going to take care of everything as far as medical cannabis goes. People are putting a lot of faith in the president, and the truth is, there's limitations to what the president can do, and there's a lot of pressure around the president. And so there's a lot of people I feel like are caught like deer in a headlights, waiting to see what happens. And I actually think this is definitely not the time to wait and see. That we've seen the order. We likely, know what's going to come out of the rescheduling hearings. And, the laws are clear. I think what people are referring to is how they're going to be enforced. And, you know, at Americans for Safe Access, we have a much broader goal in mind than just trying to navigate, uh, you know, this little bit of progress. But it's going to be much easier for us to move forward if we are working within a landscape where people agree that patients need access. And so right now, due to the Attorney General's order, the rescheduling process, you know, our top health agencies recognize that cannabis has accepted medical use, but whether or not you have access to medical cannabis really still depends on your zip code and your bank account. And at Americans for Safe Access, we're working to integrate cannabis medicines into our healthcare system so that everyone has access uh, to medical cannabis, no matter where you live, how much money you have in the bank, what your job is. We think that you should have access to this medication. But right now, everything is really in the air. And so there's a lot of ways that the Attorney General's order can be enforced. There's still not a lot of guidance for states and for federal agencies. And so, this is a time really to remember why we're doing this and you know, really use this time to get as many people on our side calling on Congress to create nationwide access. And so at Americans for Safe Access, of course, we're a patient advocacy organization, and we're not going to stop fighting until we know that the 129 million Americans who have a chronic disease, have cannabis as an option if that works for them. We know that there's over 30 million Americans that live with rare diseases. 95% of those, of the 7,000 known rare diseases have no FDA treatment. Uh, there's over 1 million people with uncontrolled epilepsy. Many of them find relief with cannabis. At this time, half of older Americans are taking between 5 and 20 medications a day. And, a lot of that is because of polypharmacy, that they have these chronic conditions that typical pharmaceutical single target drugs aren't working for them. And this is a crisis. This is sending 750 Americans over the age of 65 to hospitals every day to treat side effects of polypharmacy. There's over 1 million Americans that live with MS. There's over a third of Americans that have chronic pain. 10% of those with chronic pain have intractable pain, which means they can't work or take care of their children or their daily functions. And they're not getting relief from pharmaceuticals. A third of veterans have chronic pain related issues. We know that those who are living with chronic pain are twice as likely to um, turn to suicide to relieve that pain. And this is expensive, right? Chronic pain is expensive, both in treatment, but also in lost productivity, childcare. All these expenses add up. The opioid misuse crisis is also has a pretty hefty price tag. And 90% of our $5 trillion healthcare costs in the United States are from chronic and mental health conditions. And so that's why we're fighting every day. But as we are trying to work with Congress to move forward with solutions, people may not understand that outside of um, the sort of cannabis news that you may be getting because of your algorithms, or maybe you're not seeing these headlines, that your average everyday American is, when they hear about rescheduling, they're mostly hearing about tax revenue and about businesses on one hand, and then they're seeing headlines um, about some, negative aspects of cannabis. Some of them are overblown. Some of them are true. Some of them need to be addressed. But, imagine if you're not a cannabis advocate, if you've had one negative experience with cannabis, and these are the headlines that you're seeing, right? And as we're moving forward with these campaigns, we're seeing everyday Americans, bringing up concerns that are valid, right? If they're seeing these headlines about, um, you know, cannabis getting in the hands of youth, they're seeing these headlines about cannabis use disorder, about CHS. It can be pretty scary, and I think if you're not getting the answers um, to these questions, to these issues, and on one hand, and then on the other hand, you have organizations like SAM saying that this is why we can't move forward with access to cannabis. And so in 2024, the National Academies put out a report on impacts of public health for current cannabis policy. This was about adult use, medical, and it made some very specific recommendations and you know really articulated a lot of issues that they thought that we should be I'm using the royal we, but that we should be looking at as we introduce cannabis into our society. And that includes accidental ingestion, uh, impaired driving, secondhand smoke, environmental impacts. And since that report came out, there hasn't really been a organized effort within the cannabis community or within governments to address those issues. And so you have organizations like Smart Approaches to Marijuana that are sort of taking, those issues and the concerns and, bringing this concept of prohibition back as the answer. And this is allowing Sam to kind of hijack a lot of the issues that we also are concerned about. Parents and patients, we have a lot of the same concerns about children having access or um, both as a medicine or accidental ingestion. But the challenge is that when these parents or employers go look for information to answer their questions or to address their concerns, what they're finding is SAM. What they're finding are parents groups that are against um, cannabis. And although Sam and a lot of these anti-drug organizations say that they're focused on big marijuana, the reality is that they're fighting against rescheduling. They're fighting against medical cannabis. And today, at the federal level at least, medical cannabis is the only thing that has made any progress. And so if people are coming after cannabis, medical cannabis is the only thing that they can come after. Adult use is still illegal. And so what we're seeing is, basic concerns being weaponized, right? You have youth access issues. Sam's answer, and their messaging is that legalization is putting children at risk. Uh, Product safety issues, they're saying that, these are not safe. You can't trust the labels. And we know that that can be true in unregulated markets. Um, but there's not anyone saying, hey, we're actually aware of these issues and addressing them. Uh, Same thing with impairment. You know, I think every time we see a headline about impaired um, or drugged driving, uh, we see like 100 responses from the cannabis community saying that cannabis is safer than alcohol. And, I think that that's missing the point. I think that parents and Americans don't want to see anyone intoxicated driving. And so you can see without a response from our community, or even, facts to start with responses, you can see how and why we're starting to see a backlash against cannabis policy. And, we're seeing this in more and more parents groups that are turning from, concern about um, children having access or children accidentally um, uh, getting access to cannabis to these very strong anti cannabis positions. And of course, this is playing out in some of the states like Massachusetts, Maine's of actually campaigns to overturn the adult use programs. And I think that's why we're seeing, when Trump talks about cannabis, he's very careful to talk about just medical and really talk, negatively against any other types of cannabis. That line that he's walking is is to make sure that the anti-cannabis people aren't going to come after him for moving forward on medical cannabis. This is also a time as we're integrating cannabis into our healthcare, integrating it into our society, that accurate information is so important. And I think we're kind of caught in the middle of propaganda on one side, and then even within the cannabis community, denial of some of the harms. And so, mistrust of any information means that people aren't paying attention to the risks of accidental intoxication, of impairment, workplace safety, and that makes people really nervous. The same is true of, health considerations with cannabis. Not Cannabis isn't good for everybody. There are certain health conditions that cannabis isn't helpful and it can actually be harmful. And if you believe that every negative um, fact about cannabis is propaganda, and you're telling other people that, that could be dangerous for people who have pre-existing mental health conditions, or are, thinking that it's safe to use cannabis during their pregnancy. And then, that sort of trickles into some of the real harms of contamination, of, impacts long term, short term. uh, impacts of aspergillus in cannabis for patients with organ transplants. And so Cannabis Safety Month is a time for us to look at the facts around cannabis safety and invite our communities, invite our colleagues to look at the facts, but also look at some of the solutions um, to some of these concerns that are working. And so as we are dealing with this change, that we can make sure that these pieces are falling where we want them to. And that as um, right now with the top health agencies finally admitting that cannabis has medical use, that we should be able to take that next step and start creating national programs to make sure that every patient has access. But people are kind of frozen because of all of this mixed messaging and misinformation, both positive and negative. And we're so far from being done. I mean, we have the AG order, but we don't have any guidance from the Department of Justice of as what this means for patients as far as the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act. There are several federal agencies that have outdated policies that are pretty discriminatory that haven't been changed. We have to move this country that has been in a state of prohibition from you know complete rejection of medical cannabis to figuring out individual assessments and having to educate themselves about patients that need this care. And veterans, military, it's really unclear what their access looks like. And so that can only happen with Congress. We have this deadline coming up in November. The hemp loophole is closing, and there will be millions of Americans who de were dependent on that market, even though it was, an unregulated market, and there were some issues with that. The response Congress had to that and to that market, and a lot of it because of these concerns, some of them legitimate, some of them not, was to just close it off. And that's going to impact millions of patients. And so, as we are asking these agencies to make these changes, as we're talking to governors and state legislators to come up with new pathways for access to um, some of these products that will now be illegal under the hemp laws, is much easier for us to make headway if we're able to do that in an environment where society is behind us and that there people aren't questioning whether helping patients is going to hurt their communities. And I think it's important for people to know outside of DC that President Trump's position on medical cannabis and the actions that his administration has taken has created a definitely a schism between him and the Republican leadership. This the Senate and congressional leadership are not behind him. We also saw this, leading up to the hemp bill last year, that 39 of the 50 states, their attorneys generals were asking Congress to do something about about hemp. We also see this in the leadership signing on to these letters to Trump, telling him not to reschedule cannabis, both in Congress and in Senate. And the people that are signing these letters are in charge. They're in control of the Senate and Congress. They're the chairs and heads of all of the committees where we have legislation moving. And you may not have heard anyone talk about Project 2025 for a while, but that's sort of the blueprint behind what a lot of the thought leaders around the Trump administration are implementing. And, there's a lot in there about prosecuting drug activity. And we're starting to see some of that in Congress. We've seen the attorney generals send out notices to U.S. attorneys to prosecute people who are possessing cannabis on um, federal property. There's a RICO task force right now looking into illegal cannabis that supposedly is funding the Communist Party of China. And the reason this is so important is that these moves that have been made, do not address access for everyone. There's a lot of unknowns. At Americans for Safe Access, we've been working to pass the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act that will place cannabis under the Office of Medical Cannabis under HHS. And right now we're dealing with everything under DEA, under Schedule 3, which means that there's only access for some patients, depending on where they live. No guidance for federal agencies, no regulations for these products, no interstate commerce, and again, sort of everything up in the air. And so we have a long way to go to move from what we've been doing in the States with compassionate use to integrating cannabis into our healthcare systems. And that is going to take coordination with all of the different sectors of healthcare. It's going to take efforts within Congress, within state houses, governors, to move that forward. And so during Cannabis Safety Month, I'm going to remind people that confronting cannabis safety, it's not a concession to prohibition, right? Admitting that there are some things about cannabis that are not safe, um, are not saying that are giving in to the prohibitionists. It's really creating the foundation that's needed for us to integrate cannabis into our healthcare and society. And so our approach during Cannabis Safety Month is looking at these concerns and where our opponents are trying to take over that message and framing it as, reasons for prohibition. This is an opportunity for us to ask questions and bring forward solutions. Um, and so instead of just saying no, cannabis, isn't a problem. There isn't a problem with youth access. There's an opportunity for us to say, we hear that, we hear those concerns, and demonstrate some of the solutions that have been working across the United States, as well, and identify areas where we do need better policies or better protocols. And during Cannabis Safety Month, we'll be addressing these issues across a variety of topics. So this is an invitation for the cannabis community to lead this discussion, to help us move these conversations from fear to facts. And by confronting these polarizing topics, is it really the only way that we're going to be able to cut through the political rhetoric and get to a place where um, we can broaden the support for medical cannabis while people feel and know that these other issues are being addressed. Otherwise, every time we talk about medical cannabis, people are going to be looking at patient access on a balance with youth access. And we know that that isn't fair. So during Cannabis Safety Month, we're going to be creating a national platform for compassionate dialogue, for education and action. So really listening to our communities, uh, taking on these concerns and bringing solutions. And that means, not having knee-jerk reactions to parents, organizations, really listening, see where the public is at. There are a lot of people in this country that have now had negative experiences with cannabis and, aren't feeling like advocating for cannabis. They may not be necessarily working against us, but we have, a lot of space to fill to make sure that we have, especially those loud voices on our side. Okay, so here's how it works. We've broken up September into 5 weeks. So the first week, we're gonna start with sort of Cannabis Safety 101, use this time to really lay out the policy landscape, talk about the different types of safety, give people a common terminology that we'll be using, talk about the federal laws, talk about the safety issues that arise from access deserts and from prohibition, and really explore some of the government approaches that we're seeing to cannabis safety. Week two, we're going to be talking about product safety. So, talking about the status of cannabis testing, really looking into the future and see like what will product safety look like in a post-prohibition world. Take a look at where we are with recalls and those regulations, how those are working, where we are with labeling and product transparency, and really making sure that people understand the connection between contaminants, adulterants, pesticides, and consumer health. Week three, we are going to dive into probably some of the most controversial topics around cannabis, which are the benefits and risks. Uh, really look at some of the headlines and some of the research that's come out. This is where we're seeing a lot of fear, definitely in the medical professional communities, and bring together experts and have these conversations, talk about cannabis use disorder and the impact that the sort of overzealous use of that disorder, what that's meaning for patients who need organ transplants. Talk about CHS and this growing issue, and really dive into what are the facts, what are the symptoms, what do people need to know. Week four, we're going to jump into youth strategies for 2026. So addressing accidental um, ingestion, talk about appropriate education by various ages for children. Um, Look at what's happening with underage access. Look at the laws around juveniles. Cannabis is still illegal for all juveniles unless they have a recommendation with their parents involved. And then also looking at some strategies around, both what we're seeing with self-medication and mental illness, what cannabis use means for sort of self-treatment, but also, what are some of the responsibilities for parents to disclose to their um, teenagers some of their family history with disorders that make cannabis use very risky. And then finally, the last week will be public health impacts. So we'll dive into drug driving, accidental intoxication, environmental impacts. What are some of the calls and responses for cannabis safety? Um, where is there, data versus fear? Like what are we really learning about cannabis access and some of these issues? And, I think a big topic people have is like how do people know if something is cannabis right now? There's a lot of different products on the market. And so we're going to address these in a lot of different ways. We're going to have webinars, we're going to have expert interviews. This is where we're hoping our partners and sponsors can join in. We'd love if your organization um, just did a webinar on one of these topics and would like to add it into the queue for Cannabis Safety Month. This is the place to put it. Um, we're turning to community partners to bring this information to your community. This is really just sort of an umbrella and an opportunity, an excuse to talk about cannabis safety. We're going to be creating a lot of educational resources. We're going to be releasing booklets and guides, and really taking information and putting it into practical tools that people can use. And we're going to try to take this conversation outside of just our communities and utilize media and public education uh, through events, um, through press briefings to hopefully bring these topics to a larger audience. And we're also going to be connecting the dots between cannabis safety and policy solutions. So we'll be creating content for policymakers, uh, you know, really putting out specific calls and recommendations for policies. And throughout the month, we're going to be holding, these solution spotlights. So really, focusing on solutions that we know are working, uh, highlighting products, programs, initiatives that are addressing some of these concerns that have shown that they're getting results and are something that people can implement in their communities. And then something I'm super excited about is the Cannabis Safety Awards, an opportunity to really spotlight the individuals and um, products and programs that are leading on cannabis safety. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can become a partner. The Cannabis Safety Month website, we have tools for um, everyone. So there are so many ways to engage. If you're part of an organization that shares this mission and would like to bring this information to your members or your constituents, you can become a partner, go onto the website, sign up. Um, this is an invitation for you to lead, for you to bring your expertise, not just information coming from Americans for Safe Access, but adding to this experience, adding to what your community is seeing and what tools your community needs. For Cannabis Safety Month, we're asking everyone who's a partner or sponsor that we use these standards of accuracy, patient-centered language, that we try to avoid unsupported claims, that we look at public health principles. This is not going to be an opportunity for pushing products, but sharing ideas, and that this is all done in the spirit of access and inclusion. And partners will be able to participate in webinars, some that we're organizing. If you'd like to use these materials and organize your own, we can help promote those. Like I said, we'll be putting out guides. Right now, we have a lot of our partners are helping us with that content. Uh, you can share media kits, share the social media campaign with your community. You can distribute these resources, put up posters, literally like we've created a resource for every part of your day to plug in. Um, we're also looking for people who can translate, help with accessibility of this information. We're inviting people to organize your own events to facilitate dialogue in your community. If there's a contentious issue around medical cannabis, in your state, in your city, use Cannabis Safety Month as an opportunity to bring people around the table and talk about those issues, and of course, advocate for solutions. You can join the host committee, help us, you know, with programming, with partnership development. And again, you can sign up for all of this, and all this information is on the website. If you're a partner, we're going to be promoting our partners through profiles and stories, have official badge that you're a part of the campaign. We'll be acknowledging you through on materials as well as in some of the events in our closing event. So it's pretty simple. You go to the website, you fill in the organization profile. You can select if you want to just work on one of the weeks. You can work on all of them. You may have something in mind. So then you tell us what activities you'd like to participate in. You say that you agree with the standards, and then we'll send you a partner toolkit and you can get started. We're going to provide you with access to the webinars, branding toolkits. We're going to support, if you want to put on events, support your speakers, policy tools, educational materials. So really, if this is a topic that you want to bring to your community, we gotcha. There's sponsorship opportunities. Again, this is all on the Cannabis Safety website. Our goal is to raise $250,000 through Cannabis Safety Month. And so there's the sort of hierarchical way that you can fund the campaign. We're going to be spotlighting our sponsors through all of these activities. But I think something that's important for sponsors to understand is that a lot of things we're creating are going to live beyond Cannabis Safety Month. So our sponsors who have their logos on PSAs or on webinars or guides, that sponsorship that is going to continue to pay um, for at least the next year as we continue to promote until the next Cannabis Safety Month. Again, go to the website, sign up, fill out the information, make your payment, and we'll send you everything you need to participate. And, if for sponsors, you have to give some amount of money, but if you want to increase some of the benefits of that sponsorship, there's all sorts of in-kind um, contributions you can make as well. And so those are all on the form that you fill out when you sign up. We're looking for media partners to help with both editorial and promotion. Um, we're looking for contributing media partners that actually um, pick topics, facilitate some of those conversations, uh, presenting media partners that would actually sort of take on an active role in organizing and promotion. And, we're looking for volunteers. This is a big mission, a big campaign with big goals. And so, um, whether you want to jump in as an individual or organize your workplace, we have all sorts of ways that you can plug in. The nominations are open for Cannabis Safety Awards. This is an exciting campaign part of the campaign. Not only does it feel great to get an award, but it also feels great to be nominated, to be recognized. We want to make sure that we're really highlighting and celebrating those people that are taking on cannabis safety and looking for solutions. And so if you know an individual that is doing this work, we have awards for individuals. Again, I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly, and all of this is on the website. Um, by spotlighting these individuals in these programs, we're not just making people feel good, but we're also letting communities across the country know that there are people who care about this. So anyone can nominate. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate someone you know. You can nominate something you just saw on LinkedIn or on Facebook. There's no fee. You just go to the website and pick one of the awards and give us information about them. You have until September 5th, and then people will be voting for the winners all during Cannabis Safety Month, and we'll announce the winners at the closing event. And again, those awards include awards for products and innovations, for programs and initiatives, and of course for individuals. And like I said, I'm very excited about being able to give these awards, having an opportunity to really thank those people who are stepping up and ensuring that medical cannabis will live to see another day. I know of a lot of folks I want to nominate, but I also know that there's tons of individuals and programs out there that I would love to learn about during Cannabis Safety Month. We're giving awards for programs and initiatives. Take a minute, go check out the categories, nominate someone. It feels great to be nominated for an award. You don't have to know them. Nominate yourself if you're working on something that you want people to know about and read about. We're going to be spotlighting them throughout the month. And the big thing that I hope you get from this is that really Cannabis Safety Month is about getting involved. Every contribution matters. So if your organization can share one post on social media if you can mobilize volunteers, if you can show up and edit one of the one-pagers, offer some staff time to help us with outreach, provide financial support. Really, we've created a platform that fits any size organization, individuals, people who have a little time, people who have a lot of time, people who have no money, people who have resources. So again, this campaign is so important. Uh, my goal is that at the end of Cannabis Safety Month, we just have a stockpile of educational information for community members that are looking for answers to address their fears and concerns, and that when reporters are writing stories about a press release that comes out from opponents of cannabis, that they'll be able to see this very active community that is here working on these solutions, and that we're aware of some of these problems, but that we're also aware that some of these concerns are being politicized. And so at Americans for Safe Access, we believe that until cannabis is fully integrated into our healthcare system through a national medical cannabis program, that there's still going to be large portions of the United States that don't have access. Could be because the patchwork of state laws, federal policies, product availability, cost barriers, and inconsistent protections. And so this campaign is part of creating the political environment we need to fulfill our mission, to take the next steps, to get Congress and our policymakers to feel comfortable with taking the steps needed to advance medical cannabis policy. If you have some time, we have these hour meetings over the weekends where you can join for an hour, get some work done, hang out with a bunch of cool people, not just me, but other cool people. And during these events, we're actually giving folks all the tools they need to help us with outreach for Cannabis Safety Month, and it's an opportunity to ask more questions. I also wanted to let you guys know that this webinar for the release of our call for the inclusion of endocannabinoid system in nutrition education curricula is up on our YouTube page. A lot of people have been asking about that press briefing. And so again, whether you volunteer, nominate an awardee, become a partner, become a sponsor, donate, just get involved uh, because we have so much to gain. We have so much potential. But unless we show up and get our communities on our side, we're going to continue to face resistance even when we're so close to the finish line. So as we are seeing stuff about Cannabis Safety Month, know that I'm giving you a personal invitation. At this time, this is your invitation to lead. No one else is going to do this but us. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email me, Steph at Safe Access. There, we have an FAQ, Steph at safeaccessnow.org. We have a frequently asked questions section on the Cannabis Safety Month webpage. And I hope you guys are excited and ready to show off the work that you're doing in this area. Bring an open mind, be ready to listen and learn and present solutions that will ensure a future for cannabis access in the United States.